Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. RMPs presents with Wednesday's Child, Arsenic Minerals and Their Use in Industry. So, let us begin then, shall we? Now, the title of this presentation is really due to a throwaway visual psych ag in one of the greatest films of all time, that being the 1991 Addams Family. But altogether, arsenic is really one of those things that is pretty notorious all on its own. The inheritance powder, king of poisons, all are names for one of history's most notorious elements. Atomic number 33, it is classified as a heavy metal. So let us look at some of the ores in which it is found, as well as some other ways in which it occurs naturally, and some of the potentially maybe surprising ways in which such a famously toxic material has been used in history. Now, elemental arsenic has atomic number 33 and an atomic weight of 74.92, right down there you can see. Now, how it got its name is a very complicated chicken and the egg scenario. Is scholars can't really seem to agree from one source to the next as to which origin is the earliest and really the true one. Now, altogether, let's just kind of go through this right here. So, atomic number, there's your atomic weight. Now, the word arsenic itself comes from probably that top word right there. Now, originally it had Middle Eastern origins, which were then blended into kind of like other Greek words as well, with the resulting word there, arsenicon, meaning a sort of like anglicized Greek version of the adjective for male. Now, that is admittedly a very weird name for a mineral, but still, that could reference a time when metals were thought to be masculine or feminine, or also, too, some scholars wonder if it's a possibility that this is a reference to arsenic's commanding ability as a poison. Now, altogether, arsenic exists in three what are called allotropes. By the way, that right there is elemental arsenic down below. It is metallic gray in color, as you can see. Now, what is an allotrope? Well, an allotrope is a form of an element with a differing structural arrangement of atoms, which in turn gives it different properties. Now, like you can see right here, so gray arsenic, which is the most common one, now versus black arsenic versus yellow. Just look at how those different atomical structures are arranged. Now, obviously, the way that certain atoms are arranged versus others lends to different strengths, different weaknesses, what have you. Well, not really weaknesses, but just different elemental capabilities. Now, gray arsenic, by the way, is also spelled gray with an E, and it is also known as metallic arsenic, too. Now, altogether, arsenic itself is from the trigonal crystal system. Now, this is elemental arsenic, mind you. Now, gray has a hardness of 3.5, and its specific gravity is 5.73 grams per centimeter cubed. Now, black is the same, and yellow is about 1.97 grams per centimeter cubed. Now, this allotropy, as you can see, can greatly affect an element's properties. Because of these atoms bonding in different ways, that affects the density of the structure. Yellow arsenic is the most brittle form, which probably reflects why its specific gravity is so low. Now, though, don't confuse the phrase yellow arsenic with the mineral orpiment, which is one of the several that we're going to be looking at right now. Now, these are just a selection of several of the various arsenic minerals that are out there. There are quite a few. Now, these are just several of the more famous ones that you may hear of. Now, this one is arsenopyrite. We won't get too technical here in terms of the individual mineralogy and what have you, but still, all the same, the primary ore is indeed arsenopyrite. Now, iron arsenic sulfide. It has a monoclinic crystal system, and the crystals are gorgeous. Oh my God. This is one of those things where people look at it, and I really don't think that people realize just how stunningly beautiful arsenopyrite can be, because it's one of those things where it's like, oh, it's brown, it's just kind of dull colored, and people don't realize just how absolutely beautifully vibrant and wonderfully looking just certain minerals with, say, dark colored crystals can be. I mean, on the left there, look at that specimen. That's with calcite. And then on the right there, that's a very good close-up of the crystals that I found. That specimen is from Kosovo itself. Now, like arsenic, elemental arsenic that is, it's found in hydrothermal veins along with pegmatites and in sites of contact metamorphism. Now, here is a very, very atypical cobaltite from Sweden. The cobaltite is the silvery crystal up on the side. Now, the mineral, much to something which I've always found kind of amusing, is named after this creature from German folklore called the Kobold, which is sort of like a little goblin looking thing, kind of. I don't know, that sort of looks like what is it? Schmeagol. That was it. I was trying to think of it and I almost said Andy Serkis. Definitely, yeah. Not Andy Serkis. Yes, that definitely does look like a little like a Schmeagol guy type right there. Now, but that is cobaltite. Now you have enargite as well, too. And then we are at my two favorite arsenic minerals. And yes, I am that weird. I have two favorite arsenic minerals, and I cannot decide. You know what? When you're like me, you just embrace it and you have two favorites. Now, I can't pick one. Now, possibly the most commonly known ores of arsenic are these following two. Now, they're very commonly associated with each other, which geologically meaning it just means that they're often found on the same mineral specimen. So here you have orpiment. Now, this is the close-up of these crystals in a specimen from the Twin Creeks mine in Nevada. Again, beautiful, beautifully gorgeous specimen. It's very it's almost kind of like misleading. It's almost for, like me, I find snakes to be stunningly gorgeous. They're a masterpiece of engineering. But if you look at, say, poisonous snakes, there's this almost like there's this, like that. There's a toxicity behind that very great masterwork that what they are. Now, this is realgar. If you have problems telling apart orpiment and realgar with you look at specimens, just very, very easy trick that I learned when I was little. Realgar begins with red. So red, realgar, red, the letter R. So you can just separate them that way. Now, this particular specimen close-up, these crystals are from Czechoslovakia, and you can see just a tiny bit of orpiment up there in the top middle, with this being a selection of all of them all together. Now, all of the preceding isn't to say that you shouldn't collect potentially dangerous minerals. Please, by all means, you do you, you collect whatever you want. Now, just do so with an open mind that certain things can be more hazardous than the other. And let us look into how, well, arguably the most famous natural toxin, arsenic has been used for millennia in both harmless and in, well, not so harmless applications. So let's see how it became known as the king of poisons. Now, this right here. So, what happens? This is arsenopyrite, by the way. So, what happens when people ingest arsenic, and how can this happen? Well, persons ingesting arsenic, those that survive, God willing, report that it's mostly tasteless, with a few saying that it had a metallic or like a bitter tinge to it. Now, the problem is that this thing is so easily able to bond to other elements that makes it very key to be a successful poison. it can bond to so many other things. It can really kind of assimilate its way through other compounds and then into the human body. Now, the worst of these compounds probably is when it bonds with oxygen, it becomes arsenic trioxide. So, arsenic and then three oxygens, also known as white arsenic. Now, symptoms of arsenic poisoning can mimic severe food poisoning, which is why so many people back in the day got away with arsenic poisoning because at first, sadly, until it was too late, people didn't realize what was going on. This would later progress to issues with your circulatory system and heart, nervous system, skin problems, issues with the brain and other organs, and then even to sadly seizures, coma, nail discoloration, and even an increased risk to cancer is linked to arsenic poisoning. Now, why arsenic has been used throughout time can be linked down to really what I'll just pinpoint down to four key sources. The first one, which I'll put in very, very loose air quotes here, is fashion. The next is harmful intent. And then we have industry, so practical applications, which it is used for every day. And then also to natural contamination, which we will look at the latter first. Now, known to be toxic for millennia, today's top cause of arsenic poisoning is actually through completely natural causes in your groundwater. So, arsenic is 53rd in abundance in the Earth's crust in terms of elements, and 20th in abundance elements in the Earth overall. So, when you're thinking about really just how abundant it is, and then really how common it can be associated in igneous rocks, it can enter into the groundwater through just normal, ordinary means like that, the gradual decomposition and breakdown of certain things, the breakdown of these igneous rocks, or also to oxidation of certain minerals via things like gold mines, where it is occasionally associated with, and a couple other sources because it can concentrate even too in the tissues of seafood. Now, the current US standard, which is actually pretty controversial and that I'm not going to get into with a 10-foot pole, is 0.010 milligrams per liter for arsenic. Now, arsenic in one's water is a problem that affects many today simply because of the element's association with igneous rocks and because of its easy ability to bond to other elements. And because of this, well, before standards were adopted, it was not at all unheard of for people to ingest even more of the element. Say for okay, so let's take a ordinary person from the audience, okay? All right, sir, you right there. Okay, so recognize this guy right here, folks? Now, Edgar Allan Poe's death is attributed to a variety of sources, which again is another thing that I'm not touching with that proverbial 10-foot pole. Now, but because of that, so a little while ago, he and his wife's hair were tested. Yes, they had samples of their hair. That's something that I'm not going to get into. It's kind of a weird and long story, but still. So they had samples of their hair and they tested them. Now, contrary to myth, while he did have elevated levels of arsenic in his hair, which actually were 15 times today's normal level, in fact, that is still only 2/3 the level associated with arsenic poisoning. That's one of the kind of the main theories going along with Poe's death right now. No, it was not due to arsenic poisoning. While he did have what some may consider a lot in his system, it actually was very ordinary for the standards of his day at that time in Maryland. Now, the level of arsenic in Poe's hair and in his wife's as well is directly attributed to not only their drinking water, which is still a problem in parts of Maryland today, but also their usage of what are called patent medicines. Now, his wife Virginia had tuberculosis, was not a well woman, sadly, Poe, of course, had a variety of different issues. And patent medicines were these things that were very common during the Victorian period and other eras, where basically they were, say, tonics, medicines, things that weren't medically approved that people ingested in good faith, trying to make themselves better. Because, I mean, you have to keep in mind, it's not like folks always have easy access to doctors and certain things. So they're trying to do whatever they can to make things work, right? Now, I'm not saying for anybody to go out there and to do stuff like that, but still, don't judge these people of the past for what may be seemingly very weird choices. Now, just to use as an example, Poe's wife Virginia had even higher amounts of arsenic in her hair, but her death isn't questioned. Now, she was known for using a like a skin tonic. I believe it was called Fowler's solution, and also two various other preparations at the time of her death, which were very high in, you guessed it, arsenic. So it can be attributed through very ordinary, normal means. And it can be used for very ordinary, normal means, such as an alloy of lead within and completely on its own within the electrochemical industry. It's also used as some medicines in a bonding agent, and even in some limited oop, there it goes, and even in some agricultural and livestock applications. That chicken moving pretty fast is probably a sign that while it is used in some things for chickens and other poultry as medicine and some other deals, its role and the amount required is very, very debated. It's something that still, obviously, you don't want to mess around with arsenic, and so people are going back and forth as to, yeah, maybe we should cut this out completely. Now, a group of people that did not cut arsenic out completely, and if anything, kept adding it more and more and more and more into their daily use, were these guys, the Borgias. Now, so white arsenic is obviously a famously lethal poison. Now, its most famous users were the infamous Borgia family. You might recognize the name from the Assassin's Creed games, the ones that had Ezio in them, or there was this TV show that had, oh golly, what's that guy's name? He voiced Scar in The Lion King. Jeremy Irons, that's it. So, point being, there was the father Rodrigo, who is also known as Pope Alexander VI, and his children Cesare. Down there it's spelled Caesar, but commonly it's pronounced and spelled Cesare, and then Lucretia. So, allegedly, it's one of those things where it's allegedly with a big wink and a nod because they pretty much did this and more or less admitted it. They ran this campaign of terror against their enemies during the Renaissance by poisoning those that stood in their way of political gain. So that's probably why that guy there on the right is like, I don't think I'm going to sit down with a lot of you. I'm just going to back away and, I'm just going to go over here right now. Thank you. No thanks. I'm not having any of that wine. So he's being smart and he's not sitting down next to the three of them. And according to legend, the recipe for their own personal white arsenic blend, which was called La Cantarella, was destroyed after their deaths because it was so potent they didn't want it to fall into the hands of somebody even more devious than they were, which is, man, that's kind of frightening. Now, arsenic accounts for the majority of Europe's 19th century criminal poisonings. While it does leave some obvious signs, it tends to slow natural decomposition in human tissue and it can be around for decades. I mean, this stuff can collect in the stomach and intestines and leave some pretty telltale lesions, but still, all the same, the problem was for so long that there was no definitive test to prove its presence, which is why it was used so much. That was changed in 1846 with what was called the Marsh test, after which the use of arsenic in homicide greatly and thankfully decreased. But answers are not always as simple as that. Sometimes people have used arsenic and other things, lead comes to mind immediately, knowingly for what they believed were practical applications. Did they know it was poisonous? Probably, yeah, sure. But they wanted a fashionable after effect of, say, perhaps a pale complexion or a house decorated in the then modern style. Now, like the aforementioned patent medicines, there are several instances of the use of arsenic in substances such as dyes and even skincare. I mean, like this fellow here on the left, he is surrounded by just the choking clouds of arsenic toxins that are in the products all around his house. Things like, okay, so you don't necessarily have embalming fluid in your house, but again, if you do, different strokes for different folks. There's fabric and food dyes, herbicide. It was used as an insecticide into the 1930s. A paint additive, rodenticide within various household objects, including, most famously, and what we'll look at now, wallpaper. So that right there, that particular object, you see that bright and then the mint green, all colors due to, yep, arsenic. So for a while, people were dealing with plant-based pigments and some other various minerals and also to copper pigments. But those fell out of style by the 1860s because people did not really think that the colors were vibrant enough. Contrary to myth, the Victorian period was not all stuffy people just kind of like caught up in themselves. It was a time of great societal change, people liking bright colors, bright patterns, lots of designs, lots of just kitschy things around their house. Now, Shields green, Paris green, emerald green, parrot green, Vienna green were all fancy hoity toity designer names for colors made with arsenic, especially with a mix of combining it with copper and hydrogen. Now, the problem was that if you exposed these various components here to sulfides and other pollutants, the the earliest color that was developed, that one right there, Shields green, it would blacken. So they then developed the emerald, which was also called the Paris green, to counter that. Now, problem being that people would then inhale arsenic dust, which led to the usual host of issues. Now, it's highly debated as to if this had a hand in the stomach cancer that caused Napoleon's death, but if you look it up, it is something that is talked about a lot in the literature concerning him. Napoleon's favorite color was, yeah, I can't believe we actually know something as random as Napoleon's favorite color, but you know what? It's the internet, so you can poke up really weird stuff like this. But that was his favorite color, that bright, bright green. And he had all the walls of his bedroom in St. Helena and all sorts of other places, various wallpapered paints, what have you, with that bright, bright neon mint green, which were all, yep, arsenic pigments and paints. Now, that is actually linked to a very high increase in risk for stomach cancer. Did that lead to the stomach cancer that was his official cause of death? Maybe, potentially, but still, all the same, it's something to, just ponder here. Now, what it certainly did cause was a decline in the usage of green in the design scheme in the latter Victorian era. People actually started to associate green with something kind of a little bit more sinister, such as a something recorded within right here. It's renowned as one of the rarest books ever published. I mean, still, when you come up with a name that says Shadows from the Walls of Death, you know it's going to be a bit funky. But basically, and it's actually in, I'll wind up linking it later on below for those in YouTube. So, more or less, this entire book is filled with different patterns of arsenical dyed wallpaper. There are only 5 left in existence. You need special permission to even get near one of these books, and it has to be viewed only under certain conditions too as well. But still, it's just, I don't know. I mean, you'd think that considering how infamous it was, people would think twice about putting arsenic wallpaper on their walls, but again, they wanted these bright colors. It was something that they wanted, something that was fashionable. Now, that brings us to the close for today of our little journey through the world of arsenic and arsenic minerals. So, thank you very much for joining us, folks, and we hope to see you again sometime very soon. Goodbye now.